Okay, so here's my pile of components.
Tanner, tech, Tanner, tech, Tanner, Tanner, tech, Tanner, tech, Tanner. Hello, this is Tanner Tech.
And today, I'm going to be showing you how I get my parts. Or most of my parts, for that matter. So, most of my parts actually come from other appliances, and they are recycled. So, what you see here around me are circuit boards from a great many different amount of devices. So in this video, I'm going to show you kind of how I get these circuit boards from these devices and how I'm able to desolder the parts on these circuit boards to actually get the parts that I need for my projects, which is actually pretty cool. So let's start by diving into the sea of circuit boards to see what these circuit boards have on them that makes them so useful and where they come from. We'll then take a look at some different devices and are able to harvest their circuit boards from. Then we will look and see how I can actually find the most useful components off these different circuit boards. Let's get started. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these circuit boards. Let's start with this one, for instance. This circuit board came out of an old cathode ray tube television. And this circuit board actually has quite a lot of useful components on them. First of all, as the flyback transformer, which can be used for a great many different projects that require high voltage. It also has this inductive choke here, a transformer, many different capacitors, many small transformers, lots of high current MOSFETs for switching applications. It has big capacitors, resistors, ICs, capacitors, almost anything you could need. These circuit boards are highly useful. I also have circuit boards from garage door openers, microwaves, Wi-Fi modems, computer power supplies, alarm systems, floppy drive control systems, and so many other circuit boards. There's just too many to name. It's extremely useful to have a huge collection of circuit boards for use because you can find virtually almost any component you need inside this huge pile of circuit boards. Now I can find different appliances to harvest these circuit boards from all different places. Some of the appliances or different things that I harvest circuit boards out of, I find on the side of the road. It's actually quite interesting to see how many different appliances are just sitting on the side of the road, especially televisions. And some of them are just given to me by family, friends, and other friends, such as all these different devices that are stored in my shed right now. I have a car battery charger, a scanner, a printer, another car battery charger. Then back here we have a lamp and a car stereo. So you can get these different appliances or things that have circuit boards in them from almost anywhere. And they're extremely cheap, if not free, to get. So that is how you can get appliances. Now to get the circuit boards out, it's actually quite easy. You just take out all the screws, then you can cut the wires because you're not going to use the circuit board for its original purpose anymore. And you can just remove the circuit board, unscrew it, and throw it in your pile of circuit boards. So now that you know how to get circuit boards, let's see how we can harvest every single component on one and sort them out for future use. Let's go. Now, all these circuit boards need their components harvested for further sorting into drawers for future use, but it takes a long time to harvest the components from each board. So in this video specifically, I'm going to show you how to harvest components from this circuit board. Now this circuit board came out of a UPS, or uninterruptible power supply. Now what this means is it has an inverter on it, but sadly the inverter has broken for some unknown reason. And so this circuit board is junk as used for an inverter, but it has many good components on it that can be used for other purposes. So we'll take this to the bench and we'll desolder all the components and sort them into their desired spots. Now when you're desoldering components, you need a few important things. Now a desoldering iron is a super important device for use in desoldering components off a circuit board. Pretty much what it is it's a normal soldering iron, but the tip is different in that it has a plastic bulb attached to it that you can squeeze to draw air out of this end, so that way you can actually suck up solder into this little component right here. Now if you don't have one of these, and I got this at Radio Shack when they had everything 90% off, you can use a normal soldering iron, like this one, in conjunction with a pump action desolderer. Now I'll show you how to use both of these later in this video. So here's the circuit board we're going to be desoldering components from. Now keep in mind that some components are not worth desoldering, such as these resistors right here, because you can easily buy resistors on eBay, and you can buy 1,000 of them for like $4. So there's no real use in actually desoldering these resistors, because it's just too much of a work, not enough payoff. But some of these other large components on here have a very good use for other projects. So we're going to start desoldering them. Let's start with the largest components, with this transformer and these two MOSFET transistors. Now to desolder these heat sinks, which we're going to do first, we're going to start with this pump action desoldering iron. Now to start using this desoldering iron, which is the pump action one, because my other desoldering iron isn't heated up yet, we can start by holding the soldering iron to one of the terminals of the heatsink and just waiting. Now this is going to take a long time to heat this up because the heatsink is dissipating some of the heat you're trying to use to solder it. We can also use some more solder to help with a more even heat distribution throughout the entire terminal. Now if we press down on the plunger of this thing and we hold it to solder and then we press it, we can see that we made a little hole right here. We got rid of some of the solder around this little joint, which means we can easily remove the heatsink. Okay, you know what? Sometimes a desoldering iron, or a normal soldering iron like the one I have, is not powerful enough to melt the solder to remove large heat sinks, because they dissipate too much of the heat. So first we're going to try and get rid of these transistors, and then we're going to use a butane torch to actually get rid of the heat sinks. And to remove the transistors, we will use this desoldering iron. So what I'll do is I'll press it down first, and then hold it to the solder joint. And then we're going to hold it here until the actual solder joint melts. And once it's melted, I'll suck it up, and as you can see, it removed all the solder around the solder joint. I will do this to all the other points on the MOSFET transistor, and suck up all the solder. And as you can see, we have removed all the solder surrounding the pins of this MOSFET. But then, you should be able to gently remove your MOSFET from its place, and it should come out quite easily. Now we're going to put all the parts we find in a pile right here. So, let's get to removing the rest of these large transistors. There we go. All three transistors that are the TO22 package have been removed. So we can set them over here, and we can start to remove some of the other parts, starting with the heat sinks. Now these heat sinks won't come off by normal means of desoldering, and so we're going to have to be using a butane torch to get this off. So I'll remove the soldering tip from this butane torch, and add the torch tip. This butane torch will be able to melt the solder on the heat sinks very easily, so I can be able to pull them off. So I'll start the butane torch on low, and I will light it. And so we have a flame right here. We can then use this flame to heat up the solder around this heatsink and actually melt it off. There we go, both massive heat sinks have been removed. We'll set those over here. Now it's time to remove this transformer. And to remove the transformer, we can use our desoldering iron again. There we go, we now have the transformer removed. We'll add that to the pile of different components. Now we have the rest of the parts of the circuit board, and we can start removing those one by one. Now, these capacitors are pretty useful, so we'll desolder those. We'll also desolder the buzzer, and the crystal, and all these metal oxide varistors, along with the relay and capacitor right here. We will also desolder this button, LEDs, fuse, and a few other things. These diodes we really don't need to desolder because these can also be cheaply bought in bulk from China. It's too much work to desolder those. So let's get to desoldering. Now you should have your entire circuit board pretty much cleared. As you can see, almost every single component is removed. Now I'm not going to remove the SMD components, or this IC, or any of these metal oxide varistors, because these things are kind of useless for most things. Now this circuit board is pretty much trash, unless you want to use it as a kind of display, just to hang on your wall, because it looks kind of cool. But I'm just going to throw this circuit board away. So here we have all the components that I got. Now it's time to sort them. Okay, so here's my pile of components. As you can see, I have 2 heat sinks, a transformer, a relay, and then a lot of smaller components, including a few transistors, or maybe some of them voltage regulators, lots of capacitors, and lots of metal oxide varistors. These things are meant to protect from surges. Then I also have a few LEDs and some switches, and a little crystal, and another transistor. Now it's time to sort all these components. I'll start by putting the heat sinks inside my heatsink drawer, and my transformer in my transformer drawer. Now, about the metal oxide varistors, I'm not exactly sure which drawer to put those in, because I don't really have a drawer dedicated to that. So I'm just going to put them in Zener and Shouty diode drawer, so that way I kind of know, because those don't really belong in any drawer whatsoever. I'll then take the relay and bring it up here to the relay drawer where I'll put it away. I can then add the film capacitor to my film capacitor drawer of assorted film capacitors. I can add my buzzer to the buzzer, mic, and speaker drawer. I can add this small 103 or 10 nanofarad capacitor to the 10 nanofarad capacitor drawer. Okay, after that capacitor is added, we can look at most of these capacitors and see that most of them fall under 50 microfarads, with the exception of this one. So we can put all these inside the 1 to 50 microfarad capacitor drawer of electrolytic capacitors. We just have the LEDs, the switch, and the capacitors. We can add those into their respective drawers. All we have left is the transistors. And now some people may just look up the data sheets for these transistors, but I find this method a lot better. I have this device right here that is able to plug in any device or any circuit component, and you can test to see exactly what component it is. I made this 3D printed housing for it. Okay, as I can see, I didn't touch the pins good enough together. I think the source didn't touch. Okay, let's try that again. That was the gate. There we go. As we can see, this is an N-channel MOSFET. These 2 MOSFETs can go inside the MOSFET drawer for N-channel MOSFETs in the TO22 package. All we have to do is check these 3 more transistors. So this one, if I put it in, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to get it in there correctly, we can see that this is a PNP transistor. So we'll add that into the PNP transistor drawer. As we can see, we have another N-channel MOSFET that'll go in the N-channel MOSFET drawer. And then to test the last circuit component from that circuit board, we see that we have 2 diodes, which pretty much means this is a voltage regulator. On here we can see that it says TL780, which means it's an 8-volt regulator. So we'll put that in the voltage regulator drawer. So there you go. That's an easy way to get some new components to restock my drawers. So a lot of my components were actually found using that same method of desoldering. Now it takes a little bit of time, but afterwards it's worth it when you see that all your drawers are restocked. And whenever you're working on a project and you need a new part, you can just reach into your drawer and find a component fairly easily. So there you go. That is how you can find circuit boards, take off the components, and use those components for other projects. As always, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for my next video.